Well, first of all, please let me introduce myself. I'm Mike Federico. I'm the Vice President of the CCPR. And on behalf of the CCPR and President Dave Castles, I'd like to welcome you to our continuing webinar series, this one on leadership and legacy. Today we feature a panel of strong women on celebrating women's HERstory. It's a candid retrospective on how the relationship between women and the police sector has developed over the years and continues to provide opportunities for personal and professional growth in modern times. First, I would like to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries, an important step in reconciliation and our acknowledgement of traditional lands. And at this stage, I'd like to move things along, again in the interest of everybody's busy schedule, and take the opportunity to introduce you to our moderator. It's with a great deal of both affection and respect that it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Nancy McNaughton, MED, PhD. Nancy is the co-chair of the Coalition's Research Advisory Committee. Dr. McNaughton works with many professional groups, both within and beyond healthcare, designing and delivering curriculum, assessments, and evaluation programs, research projects, and remediation activities. Nancy's work with the police education sector for over 20 years, and is more recently working with community mental health care workers, focusing on crucial connections between effective communication, problem solving, decision-making, and implementation strategies, with special attention to responding to people experiencing mental and emotional crisis. And on a personal note, it is in this capacity that Nancy and I have worked collaboratively together when I was working for the police service. Nancy is an assistant professor in the School of Public Health in the University of Toronto and a scientist with the Wilson Center for Research and Education. It's with a great deal of honor and pleasure that I introduce to you your moderator, Nancy McNaughton. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Mike. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So yes, I have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing our panelists for today. And also just to say a few words, I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of the speakers about this topic today and having a rich conversation. And I see both Val Gates and Rich Johnson are here. And I do want to take the opportunity to mention it's a timely topic, given the auspicious launch recently of the 30 Forward project, which is headed by Val Gates in Canada and was inaugurated really at the evidence-based policing conference recently that Chief Rich Johnson of the Barrie Police Service headed up. And the focus of the 30 Forward project initiative is the advancement and the promotion of women within the policing order in order to achieve greater than 30% representation in the field. So with that, I'm looking forward to our conversation as well. So all of our speakers have made significant contributions to policing, having served at the highest levels of service both inside and outside the field. I encourage you to read their full bios. In the program, I've shortened my introductions quite a bit to make more time for us to focus on a fulsome conversation. Each speaker will present for about 15 minutes, give or take, and I will move on to the next speaker following the presentation, saving questions for, after all three have presented. And please do put your questions and anything that you are thinking about into the chat, and we'll address those at the end. I've also encouraged the speakers themselves to, if they want to have a conversation amongst themselves in terms of asking questions or raising something that struck them about the other person's presentation, to please go ahead and contribute in that way as well. Okay, so for our first speaker is Laura Kloosterman, the Executive Director of Badge of Life Canada, a registered charity supporting public safety personnel and their families through peer support, trauma-informed training, and canine-assisted intervention. A retired Ontario Provincial Police Constable with 32 years of service, Laura chairs the Board of Directors for New Path Youth and Family Services in Barrie, Ontario. Welcome, Laura.
Very nice. Thank you, Nancy. Welcome, everyone. Yes, I'm Laura Kloosterman. I'm the Executive Director for Badger Life Canada. So we are a Canadian charity that assists public safety personnel and their families dealing with an operational stress injury. I am also a retired officer after 32 years with the Ontario Provincial Police. And during my time of 32 years, I had various roles. The last one being that I retired at a professional standards, where I was put in that role by the commissioner to create an education-based resolution. So what that entailed is the resolution was an education not only for the complainant, but also for the officer. That allowed me the opportunity to see if an officer was struggling in any way, and if the complaint that they found themselves in was due to something that was going on within their personal life or professional life. I also had the opportunity to do dignitary protection. So I was the security for the Lieutenant Governor, which was an absolute pleasure to do, as well as witness protection, surveillance. I worked 1 year on homicide with Victoria Stafford, the Victoria Stafford homicide. That all of the 32 years in policing led to me becoming Executive Director for Badger Life Canada. Right now, we are in a mental health crisis for public safety personnel, so not just policing. So Badger Life Canada, we support not only police, we support corrections, and the definition of public safety personnel has grown exponentially because there's so many organizations out there that don't have the required support. For example, animal control, child protection, nurses, coroners, crown attorneys. There's all kinds of people out there. The way that we do our peer support is unique in the fact that we always have a mental health professional in the room, and it's every Monday night. So consistently Monday night for public safety personnel, and on Wednesday night for family members of public safety personnel. When I took over as Executive Director, I identified very quickly that there was a gap, and that was bringing the family in. When we start our careers, we have the big rah-rah of you're part of the family now. 32 years of policing has taught me that it's not necessarily a positive family. So we need to make sure that we have our personal families intact during the entire journey of our careers. The topic of leadership, I think, is very close to my heart because right now, most public safety personnel who are off with a operational stress injury, they're dealing with sanctuary trauma and moral injury. It's not the traumatic event, it's the toxic leadership within the organizations. So leadership is very near and dear to my heart. And I think that it is something that I'm going to continue to push a call for action. And I think it's important for us all to be vulnerable, to identify. I mean, I was in a meeting saying what I was looking for leadership. We need vulnerability. And that's what we do with Badger Life Canada, is we help leaders to see the way that they're leading affects from the top down and from the bottom up. So I'm very, very passionate about this topic, and I'm very passionate about talking about my journey with the Ontario Provincial Police. And on the other side, the New Path, the chair of New Path, that identifies the youth and the family within, so it's just within Simcoe County. So I've been a member of their board for almost 8 years, and now I'm the chair. And it's amazing to see a governance board that works so closely with the organization to assist and ensure that families and youth, nobody's left behind. So thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Laura. We will come back to you. I was taking all sorts of notes. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to our second speaker now. I see that, oh, Joy, good you're here. I saw you were going in and out a bit, but you're here now. Okay. Our second speaker is Joy Hulton, who is a certified workplace mediator, arbitrator, and conflict resolution facilitator. Joy has 30 years of expertise in employment and labor law for over 20 years and over 20 years of leadership experience. She has served as an independent special advisor to the Ontario Provincial Police, advising on respect in the workplace, harassment prevention, and conflict resolution. She now supports a sector-wide working group dedicated to developing best practices for respectful workplaces in policing. Welcome, Joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for technology. I live in one of the parts of the province that's just being upgraded to high-speed internet. And so we have days where we have nothing and days where it's great. So as you can tell from the short bio, I'm not and never have been a police officer, but I have worked in and around policing for almost 30 years now. And I do quite a bit of work with policing now in my own practice. So I'm going to share some thoughts from two perspectives, a bit of my own sort of personal and professional journey, and a bit of what I've seen in my lens as supporting policing from the outside. And the reason that I thought I'd just talk a little bit about my own journey is I think that it's reflective of a lot of us who, of women who start out in fairly male-dominated environments and have worked, you know, over a number of decades and seen a lot of change, and still see room for more change. So my particular career path has taken me from starting out in a large Bay Street law firm to over 2 decades in the public service and about the last 5 years in my own practice. And actually last week was my 40th high school reunion. And so it was, not only did it make me feel a little old, but it also was a time for a lot of reflection, like what have I done in the last 40 years? And so it made me go back and think about my 18-year-old self and what her view of the world was and what informed it and what she would think now. And looking back, I realized that I grew up in a time and a place where feminism was talked about a lot. I've been trying to explain this to my 27-year-old daughter and my 29-year-old daughter-in-law, and they just don't really get it. And so it made me realize how much that was a topic at the time. And I also grew up in a world that included attending all-girls school, where we heard all the time that we could do whatever we wanted, we could be whatever we wanted, and you know, we could have it all. And my 18-year-old self thought, great. Got into the university of my choice, went off there, got into the law school of my choice, and at 25 got a articling position with a prestigious law firm and thought, great, well, this is going great, all according to plan. And that's when reality kind of hit. And I realized that I really didn't know what having it all meant, and I didn't really know, you know, how to carve that path, in large part because I didn't have any role models. In my life up until that point, I knew women who were stay-at-home moms, who I personally think are the superheroes of the universe. And I knew women who had careers. I didn't know any that did both. And so I'd grown up with this, you know, mantra of you can do it all. But I began to quickly realize that I really had no idea how to do that, or how would I know if I'd made it. And so I also quickly learned that not everyone saw the potential in young women the way I did. Not all of them thought, you know, young women could do amazing things in environments that were still quite male dominated. And it was at times disheartening, because, you know, I'd grown up with this message that, you know, you probably have to be a little better than your male counterparts to get to an equal place, but you know, the doors are open, you know, sort of have at it. And so it was a little bit disheartening, but you know, at that time I was still young and keen and eager, and decided, no, I'm going to persevere in this what for me was a very male dominated, you know, corporate Bay Street environment. Wasn't ready to accept the world of, you know, women can join it and have it all. And I realized that what I was really lacking was role models. I had no one to mentor me. I had no one to talk to say, well, how do I do this? I did by chance encounter a woman who, although I didn't get to know all that well, became my role model, because she was doing both. She actually was the mother of 6 children, including 2 sets of twins, and yet had a very successful law career. And I think she's also a superhuman. But when I had to make some decisions about my career in a few years beyond that, I looked back to that chance encounter with someone that was a role model for me and saw huge value in it. And so when I reached a point when I had started a family and I was working in, you know, just sort of in the craziness that is a Bay Street law firm, I quickly realized this was not working for me. And I leaned into that, you know, sort of role model, and made a similar decision that she had made, which was to jump ship from from the big Bay Street law firm, walk away from a partnership track and take an in-house position in government. And most people that were around me in that field thought I had made a bad decision. That at that time, unfortunately, you know, working in-house, particularly in government, was seen as kind of second rate. Less money, less prestige. Why would I do that? But making that leap ended up being one of the best decisions that I made, both personally and professionally. And I'm very happy to say that over the years, our field, in the legal field, people have come to realize that your career, a successful career, a rewarding career, can come in many different shapes and sizes. And I think that's true of policing and other careers that and other sectors that I work with, that one size does not fit all. And it's you know, imperative to figure out what success and reward means to you. So that led me to a 20+ year, very rewarding career in the public service. I look back on it with a great sense of accomplishment and pride. I think public service is extremely rewarding and has its own rewards that are different than in other sectors. But I'm grateful for the things I was able to do, the things I was able to contribute to, even though I was in more of a, I would say, supporting role. And I spent a great deal of time supporting, at that point, York Regional Police, as well as the broader policing sector. Did a lot of work with the OACP and the Association of Police Services Boards in Ontario, and derive a great sense of pride from what I was able to do. I never would say that I found work-life balance, because let's be honest, that's not a thing. But I was able to figure out along the way how to focus myself where I needed to be, so that I found, you know, success, and I felt good about work, and I felt good about home, although not all the time. It varied certainly from day to day. And one of the things I really leaned into in those years was one piece of advice that I picked up from all the many, you know, feminism talks that I attended to back in the sort of, you know, late 80s, early 90s, was you can have it all, just not all at the same time. And that actually became my mantra for life. Because life is never static, after many years of a very rewarding and to be honest, very demanding career in the public service, a few years back, I did find that once again, my situation was not working for me. I will say I was very grateful that by that time I had learned the great value of coaching. I had had the opportunity to receive some executive coaching and to bring coaching to some of my staff. And so I leaned into coaching to figure out, you know, what did I really want to do, and what was important to me. And by that time too, I had also learned the life lesson of, it was not just important to know what I wanted to do, but also what did I not want to do? What was I not willing to sacrifice in order to achieve success and reward? So through that coaching, I determined that at that point, it was time for a big change. It was time for me to kind of become the captain of my own ship. And that caused me to make yet another big leap, which again, people around me thought I was nuts, because I was 6 years from a full unreduced owner's pension. And I was going off to start my own business. But I thought it was great, and it has turned out great. What I didn't know is that the pandemic would be declared 2 weeks after I gave my notice. That is a story for another day. It led me into a world where I get to work on things that I'm passionate about, and to take my experiences and my knowledge and, you know, lessons learned and apply them in a very healthy and positive way. And in my practice now, I work with a variety of workplaces, including police and public sector, to help them develop healthier, more respectful workplaces, and with a focus on resolution and restoration. So, you know, my decision stands, pandemic notwithstanding, not a great time to go out your own and start your own business, but lots of lessons learned. So in reflecting back, I've tried to think about what the key takeaways are. And one of them, I think, is the absolute importance of having role models and mentors. I mean, I think what a difference it would have made if I'd had more early in my career. And I've always tried to be a role model and mentor for others. I unfortunately encountered a time when some women who kind of made it to the top of their field did not turn around and support those behind you. I actually had one, you know, female partner say, I had to, you know, make it here myself, and you'll have to do the same. And I always took that lesson to say, well, that's not the kind of leader I'm going to be. So I always think that, you know, it was a great lesson learned about the importance and value of role models and mentors. Equally, the importance of honest self-talk and being able to, you know, to stop and say, am I on the right path? You know, is this what I want? Is this not what I want? And to be able to make some changes. And I think just being open to the fact that career as life is a journey, and the best tools are the ability to adapt, to change. It doesn't necessarily mean jumping ship, but it can be changing course within your same path. So I try to bring those lessons learned when I'm, you know, offering mentorship or supporting others or helping to coach leaders to be good leaders, to try to, you know, turn around to the ones behind them and offer support. So I wanted to spend a few minutes changing gears a bit to share a bit of what I've seen in my sort of what I call supporting roles in and around policing. My first exposure was when I joined the region in 1997, and I see Armin Labarge is on here, and we worked very closely together for a number of years back then. At that time, there were no civilians in management, very few in policing roles. Most of the females were in roles that were called secretaries. So I watched over many years the evolution of YRP and other police services as they civilianized management roles, grew their policing roles with civilians, and expanded the roles of women in leadership. This evolution has been slow, and that's not a surprise to me because of the male dominance of the sector. I mean, that just takes time to catch up. But I will say that in my role now, I am very pleased to see a lot of great evolution of culture in the sector, and to see a lot of great work that's being done. And I wanted to share a few observations from a recent engagement that I did with a very large police service that wanted to look at what drives recruitment and retention. And I think they took a very proactive step to really look at what draws people to a career in policing and to their service in particular, and what drives retention or threatens retention. And so I had the chance to sit with a large group of brand new recruits and talk to them about what drew them into the profession. And probably not a surprise to any of you, most of them talked about a desire to serve their community, to serve safety in their communities. A lot of them talked about wanting to be a bridge between the community they come from and the police. And a lot of them talked about wanting to be role models themselves. They said, you know, if I join and you know, others see me, who's maybe diverse, they might say, well, I can do that too. So they were very proud of that. And even though they were, you know, very young, very wide-eyed and just beginning their careers. The female recruits that I talked to really highlighted the importance of having female role models. They talked about, you know, the positive recruiting experiences where they could see women in leadership roles in policing, but also in a variety of roles, in specialty roles, in investigation and different roles, that was really important to them, so they could see themselves and aspire to that. So that was something that we shared back to the organization, the importance of you know, not just paying lip service, but actually having meaningful recruiting targeted at females, so that they could see themselves not just joining, but having a career. We also explored what drives or threatens retention. And again, not a surprise to me, or probably to any of us, that the two biggest factors were career development and culture. You know, it occurred to me that policing, like law, it offers many careers within one career. And there was great opportunities to, you know, to have career development. And a lot of people talked about the fact that the lack of career development is something that threatens retention for them. But on the flip side, the opportunity to grow and develop within their policing career is something that keeps them engaged and keeps them, you know, makes them want to stay where they are. And so investing in supporting career development is obviously hugely important. And again, not surprisingly, they talked about the importance of access to meaningful mentorship. And then on culture, and I loved what Laura said about the importance of leadership development. Again, not a surprise, but they talked about the fact that the culture, it really comes down to what's created by their immediate leaders, their supervisors, their managers, the environment they work in. All other things being equal, that is what causes people to want to stay or go. And we often hear that, you know, people don't quit their job, they quit their boss. And that's very true in every facet of work. So investing in leadership is key. We can talk all we want about culture change and culture improvement and good workplace culture, but we don't invest in leadership development, we're just not going to get very far. So I was very happy to hear that a lot of organizations, including the OACP, are really picking up on this and making leadership development a key focus of their efforts. So I'll just close my comments by saying that there is a lot of good work being done. I have the opportunity to have a bit of a bird's eye view, particularly here in Ontario. I am one of the leaders of the Working Group on Respectful Workplaces in Policing, which is a collection of police leaders and subject matter experts that has been formed specifically to focus in on how do we support the sector to see meaningful, positive improvements in workplace culture. And there are a lot of facets to that. We can do a whole day on that, but I will say the number one top of the list is leadership development. If we don't support leaders to create good environments, we're just not going to move the needle very much. And so I'm very happy to see a lot of the positive work that's being done, and to be a small part of that has allowed me to kind of continue that rewarding sense of public service that I had, even though I'm not technically in public service anymore. So those are my thoughts. Again, my sort of, you know, from the personal view to the more sort of bird's eye view. With that, I will turn it back to Nancy.
Thank you very much, Joy. Really interesting, and also I'm taking notes on what you're saying. So our third speaker is Natalie Hiltz, who is the Deputy Chief of Operations for the Greater Sudbury Police Service in Northern Ontario, and an internationally recognized Canadian police executive with close to 30 years of police leadership. Natalie has extensive operational, investigative, and administrative experience that has enabled her to navigate the complexities of modern policing and community challenges through consulting and collaboration with members, partners, and stakeholders. So welcome, Natalie. Looking forward to what you have to say.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and just acknowledge Laura and Joy. Enjoyed your presentations immensely. A lot of great insights there that I could really identify with. So we had a bit of a meeting before this webinar to try and guide, you know, some of my insights and remarks, and really I'm going to try and be very pragmatic. I do have 30 years in policing. I'll add that 14 of those, close to 15, are going to be in operations. So I've worked a lot of shift work, every single operational role. I spent 27.5 years at Peel Regional Police. I grew up in Brampton, so I had the opportunity to police in my hometown police agency, and I was very blessed to do that. And then I've been here as the Deputy Chief of Greater Sudbury for approximately 2.5 years. So I'm going to start by saying this is going to be really kind of a pragmatic, you know, account of my journey. Not a lot of women in Canada with 30 years of operational experience that are still here and not retired. So I'm really happy to do that. And I just want to thank everyone for inviting me to the table to share. I don't get asked very often, so I do appreciate you providing me a platform to do that. I'm going to say that I started when I was young, very young. I joined the Peel Regional Police Service when I was 25. And I got to tell you, my dad was an officer before me, so that really had a really, you know, a direct impact on what I chose to do with my life's work. And I got out of school during the Ray days, so there weren't a lot of, you know, positions and any government jobs, so I had to wait a little bit. But I stayed the course. Peel hired me, and I was happy to continue, you know, that tradition within my own family. My mom was a drill sergeant. We didn't have, you know, I wasn't allowed to cry. Neither was my sister. Really like a tough love family, and my dad was an officer. So, you know, my mother really was a woman ahead of her time who had a big influence on my life and what path I would take. Not as much my dad, but my mom for sure. Just a very driven woman, hustler, grinder, very principled, very ethical, very moral, and really pushed and supported me to embark on a career in policing. And so I think that's you know, a relevant and important point to make. You know, as I'm recounting a journey and starting from 1995 as a young woman. Now, listen, I would never have thought in a million years when I started, you know, that I would be a deputy chief. There's just no way. Yeah, there's no way I could have ever imagined that. You know, Canadian culture, you know, at the time, police culture, as we know, at the time, very predatorial, exclusionary, not embracing of women. I would never, ever have guessed in my lifetime I'd make the position of deputy chief. And operations at that. And not only that, some of you are aware, but also, you know, we are breaking barriers over here in Greater Sudbury, and that we are an all-female executive leadership team of a major, you know, Big 12 police agency in Ontario and across the country. And I'm happy to report to everyone, it's not all crumbling down, nothing's on fire, and, you know, we're still hustling along over here with a female chief and a female deputy chief. So I'm happy to report. I think in 95, you know, nobody could have guessed that would happen in our lifetime. And I'm very proud to be a part of the all-female leadership team here for this police service in this fine town of Greater Sudbury. Now, listen, I'm going to, you know, what did policing look like before? I know that was some of the questions we wanted to hit on. And I think, you know, we know it wasn't pretty, and I think that one of the articles and some of the literature that I came across, it was a global studies document that I encourage people to have a look at. It's dated, it's 2018, but I find that its principles are very much relevant today as they were in 2018. And what it's called is diversity is a Canadian reality, but inclusion is a choice. And this is a real foundational document for me to put, you know, how I feel into perspective, and what I think that policing felt like in 1995 and throughout my journey is really removing from those exclusionary and predatory work environments, you know, and moving to environments that are structurally and oh, hey, Betty Froze. I see Betty Froze is on the call from out west. Nice to see you, Betty. So I just say, you know, and watching policing transition over the years, I'd say a slow and painful transition. It wasn't a light switch moment or a plug and play, and being part of that journey and watching, you know, my organization at the time transition from really, you know, those predatory work environments and exclusionary to one that is at least structurally inclusive. And I just say, if you look at that document, it does resonate. I don't think any agency in Canada has really come up with authentic inclusion. We still are in the structural inclusion phase, although yes, Nancy, I'll provide a link to all the documents at the end. I'll be happy to share. But you know, I don't, 15 minutes isn't a long time. I encourage anybody who's involved in this call to have a look at that. And the principles of that document is certainly, as I said, you know, really, really relevant today as it was then. And I think that policing has done a really tremendous job in moving to that structural and trying to move to that authentic inclusion piece. And, you know, I've really said that, you know, that exclusionary piece in terms of female leadership, you know, it does impact policing. And, you know, I can say across, you know, a 30-year, you know, lens, you know, it does impact how we were investigating, you know, intimate partner violence. Well, we know through the mass casualty report that untreated DV over the years has been linked to mass casualty, not only in Canada, but the US. If we had more female leadership, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, would it be a problem? I don't know. We had a sex assault review. There's issues how police agencies are investigating sex assaults. You know, would that be an issue if we had more of that tipping point as 30 Forward is trying to bring us to that authentic inclusion, that tipping point of authentic inclusion is having a lack of, you know, females in policing and in leadership roles impacting the quality of our service delivery, and is it impacting public safety? I say yes, but I've obviously have biases. You can see that I'm a female in policing for 30 years, so obviously I am biased. But I'm going to say this. I had the luxury of really having some very, very unique opportunities across my career. And one of them was really being involved in Advancing Women in Policing Initiative. That was created by Lisa Darling of the OAPSB and her crew. And I got to say, one of the first conferences we held where we included men to the conversation and talking about inclusion and female workspaces. I saw in her something that took my breath away, and I'm going to share it with you because, that first conference, we had one of the chiefs of one of the Big 12s in a room, and we called them fireside chats. And so we included men into the conversation of inclusion in policing, like we're finally there. And to start off the fireside chat, the chief said, "How many men in the room have daughters?" And just under half the men in the room put up their hand. And then the next question was, out of the men who still have their hands up, how many of you would want your daughter to embark on a career in policing? How many people do you think kept their hands up? 0. I'm pausing for dramatic effect there because I really think, that gives us a lot to think about. And for me to go and talk about my journey and what it looked like, I think that simple story and that example tells a bigger story with all the hands that put their hands down. I really think that that's important. And so I think we should think about that. I'm going to share another personal story. So, I really, Joy, when you say you had no police role models, I'm going to say I really didn't. Female, male role models, they weren't found in my agency, although it was a big agency at the time. And I know that a lot of people just did not see the potential in young women at the time, and that's in lower ranks and mid-level management. And so, and that's important. And there's another article, there's a master's thesis by a woman named Joanne Savoy. She's retired from the Hamilton Police Service. She's a longstanding member of OWL, and she's Dr. Savoy, as a matter of fact. And she did a master's thesis on the role of policemen in policing all the way up to the role of chief of police. And there was a really interesting analogy in her master's thesis that said that there are quiet currents in policing that you cannot see. And they quietly and gently propel some people forward, almost seemingly effortlessly. But those same currents are propelling against others, like women. Even though they're invisible, they push against our effort, and we have to work twice as much to get to the same places in policing. And these are the quiet currents of behind the scenes, quiet backdoor conversations where people are talking about women, where women can't get role models, and that they are very critical about our performance, when cross-comparing against our male counterparts. And I'm going to say, when I started in policing, this was very, very true. And it was to the point where what I did is I started distancing myself from other women. Hear me out. As a young woman in a predatory work environment, distancing myself from other women that I would hear people be critical of, it was to survive and to save myself. I didn't want to be affiliated to those harsh criticisms. I wanted to stand alone. I'm saying that I know now, hindsight's 2020, that was exactly the wrong thing to do. But those unseen currents and those quiet behind the scenes backdoor conversations, they have very detrimental impacts to women then and women now, and they will continue to have detrimental impacts to women in the future. Now, listen, this is about leadership and legacy. I think that, understanding the barriers and understanding some of the pressures that women exist under is super important. And I'm going to relay another story. The story is called, I call it the Pink Team Experiment. And this is one of my favorite stories. And I played intramural hockey in Peel Police. And I started up, hockey at 37, and playing with a co-team of both blended men and women. And every year I became a captain of the team, and every year the draft would come. And we had about 6 teams. And every year the male captains of those teams, they would always pick the women last. Well, I played with these women on a tournament team, and we did quite well when we were playing hockey together, and we were winning tournaments. And I knew that they were good hockey players. So one year I said, do you guys mind if I just take all the women and I just put them all on my roster? And they said, absolutely, take them. That's great. Good luck with that. Fantastic. So they didn't have to pick them last. I picked all the women. I got the women tourney team, and I'm happy to report the joke was on them. We kicked their butts all season, and we won the tournament. And we did it in pink jerseys because they made sure to buy us pink jerseys for the pink team. Now, this is an important story, and I'll tell you why. Women were picked last. And I knew, working with one of these women, seeing these women and on the ice in a different setting, that they had skills, they had abilities, but they were picked last. When I had the ability to pick them first, we became a winning team, and we beat all the male teams in that league that year, causing for drama effect. That gives us a lot to think about, because then I asked myself, is there transposability onto policing in all the units, bureaus, and divisions across police agencies? Is there some transposability? And I'll just say, I think that, what happened the next year that we got to pick our team is that all the men picked all the women first, because I had picked all the best players. So I think that has transposability onto policing and onto how policing works, and lateral promotions and promotional processes, and across and it can transfer on to different agencies that have both men and women. And I think that story really is indicative of women being picked last. And I can say that it took me 5 tries for sergeant. 5. The only other woman I knew that tried more than I did was retired Chief Jennifer Evans. She tried 6 times. So it goes to show you that, there is a long history where women are picked last. But I'll say the next question that I was asked to answer is, those are some of the struggles in the profession that still continue to happen, but where did it transition? And I'm going to tell you where it transitioned is after I got promoted to sergeant. Where do you put women in newly promoted sergeant's positions? You put them in youth education, right? Because women love children. And so, that was hard for me. If my husband was on this call, it was a tough time in our house for a couple of weeks because I felt sorry for myself. It was a stigmatized unit. It was mostly women. What I decided to do is I decided to pick up my bootstraps, keep a positive attitude, and make something out of a stigmatized unit where nobody really believed in the work. And I got to tell you, by staying true to the course and really buckling down and looking to see how this area of policing tied into our bottom line and safety promotion, victim prevention, and crime prevention, we were really able to build the beginning roots of community safety, well-being, and policing. And it was where I was able to be critical. I was able to find how this piece of policing fit. And I was able to question our practices and truly gain a curiosity for the craft of policing like I never had before. And it truly is the transitionary time where I understood that I had a view of the world that a lot of people, my peers and some of the leadership didn't see. They didn't have the vision that I had. I was thinking differently. But again, it's a woman in policing, thinking differently, attention to detail, and really building that area within policing. When I got there, it was on the chopping block. They had a posting. One woman had applied. And when I left, we had 2 positions posted. We had 12 people applied, and very diverse, men, women, from all across the organization. And we were able to restructure that area, create a vision, mission, mandate, and it really was a platform for my pursuits in evidence-based policing and my degree at Cambridge. And that's a very, 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 a very important transitionary period for me. Now, listen, I only have 15 minutes. This is like definitely at least one bottle of wine conversation that we're going to try and do 15 minutes at work. So I'll just end up by staying, paying attention to the time. And I've done last on purpose because I like to talk and I didn't want to take up Joy and Laura's time. Is, where do I see policing going from here? And I say, that's a really big question. I know Rich Johnson's on the call and Val Gates, and very, very grateful to both of them for two things. One is for pushing the envelope of evidence-based policing in Canada, massive contribution to policing. And then as well, Val, the 30 Forward and GSPS was happy to be a part of, signing those documents and partnering with the 34. And I know we talked that some people were going to, give that a pump. And so I won't get into that. I'll let Nancy do that, but just say, I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful for our future. I'm very hopeful that I sit here as a deputy chief of a Big 12 police agency that's led by Chief Sarah Cunningham, another woman. And I got to say, it is an incredible life experience to be in these shoes. And I'm very hopeful for the future. Some of the things I'd like to see is I'd love to see a female women's policing association. We have yet to see that in Canada. We have yet to see that in Ontario. I think it's really needed. I'm still wearing a tie after 30 years of policing. Okay. I don't know any women that are wearing ties. It's not a really great, gender expression for women. And I begrudgingly put on this tie every day. And I'm hoping that one day somebody can tackle that, especially too, when I bring it back to some of the recruiting retention questions. I was in recruiting for 5 years and I've had women-only sessions, and I'm standing there in front of them in a man's tie, telling them, we're built, this is for women. This, policing it's for women. You need to join. You need to join. It's built for women. You got to sign up. And if I'm still wearing a tie, a piece of, I'd say it's an icon for maleness. And I wear this on my body, just under my neck, across, my body every day. I say, we need to start thinking more critically and getting out of our paradigms in policing. I think women on the outside are seeing this tie, and they're probably guessing that if this is what I'm wearing, that maybe the structure, the policies, and the practices within this institution, may have not changed. And I ask you, it doesn't keep me warm, doesn't create any efficiencies in my job. This is a traditional symbol of maleness. And I say, if we're still wearing these, we still get to have female association to advocate for women. I'm going to give you one more book. It's called Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Perez. Anybody, man, woman, I encourage you to read that. And then you'll understand why there's equipment that, is made for tiny men and not for women. And that's very, very important as we start to embark on serious conversations about, women in policing and retaining. And I encourage you to read that. Last but not least, I just want to say one more comment. I have a lot of women from across the province who reach out to me, and they are in dark, lonely spaces. Please read the article, Blue Doors. I tried to pull it up. I can't remember who made it, but Beyond Blue Doors, that's an article I read probably about 3 years ago. It really resonated for me. Women do suffer a lot of emotional and psychological stress, to your point, Laura, in policing. There are women, I spoke to women just last week who are alone. Their light has been dimmed. And, I just say, if you're a woman and you're listening to this webinar, please know your value and know your worth. Do not let your light be dimmed. There are people ahead of us, and there are people that continue to fight and to continue to struggle through adversity, and will continue to do the hustle and grind to advance the interests of women in policing now into the future. And be part of that hustle and grind. Don't pay attention to the noise, the quiet currents, the backdoor behind the scenes conversation. Stay true to your course, know your value, be patient, work hard, and just know you might get table scraps, but you have to make the most out of every opportunity that it comes your way. Be bold, take those risks, and push yourselves into uncomfortable spaces, and learn to build your brand and build your relationships and your networks. And I just say to all the courageous and tenacious women out there in policing who've risen to the occasion, they have dared greatly for their communities under old systems and cultural norms not built for them. I say I salute you. I salute you to standing up and falling down over and over again, and still having the tenacity and the perseverance to carry on. I just want to acknowledge people like Leanna Brayburn and Gwen Boniface, who were just acknowledged at 34 as trailblazers, which they certainly are. And that, I just have a lot of respect for women who are in policing, who have really dared greatly and elegantly weathered the struggles and storms of this police journey of ours. And I really feel privileged to have been a part of it. And, I do my best every day in representing women in policing as best as I can to break these molds and break the barriers. And I really try to give it my absolute best. And I think together we can, with webinars like this and awareness like this, and the OICP and the CACP, and amplifying women's voices, I think that we all have the capacity to build our own version of the future together, and one that includes women as equal and able partners. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Very, very inspirational. Absolutely. So I'm as I'm sitting here listening to the three of you, yeah, really, really lovely talks, all of you. I'm seeing the different aspects of this area, women in policing, that I think are sometimes in tension. So Natalie, you spoke about systems, policies, practices. And so we have Laura, who is, on the front lines of thinking about, professional standards and systems in which leadership can be spoken about as moving towards vulnerability. I'm curious about that word with respect to policing and how that actually fits. And then we have Joy, who's actually on the front lines with organizations working through the conflicts that you're talking about, Natalie. So the three of you together are really talking about the struggles in a different way, but the same struggles. And this is about leadership. So I'm people put your questions and comments in the chat for sure. But I just want to start with a broad question, which is, if someone said, well, what is your leadership philosophy? I've heard a lot about mentoring, and there's so many different ways you can mentor. And there's so many different ways that you can provide leadership, incentives or support for young women. What does that look like for you? Is it sitting in systems? Is it sitting in one-on-one personal conversations? Yeah, Natalie.
I'm going to say that it's both. I think that policy practice matters, recruitment, hiring, lateral promotional processes, and making sure we're reviewing those from, an inclusive lens. I think that's important. The population is 50% women, and yet everyone knows what the percentages are within policing, and policing leadership quite low. So I say encouraging women, mentoring women, supporting women, not reaching leadership levels and pulling up the ladder behind us, but extending a hand down and making sure that we're doing our part. I don't want to leave policing never having been a role model or mentor or someone that was inspirational to help ease someone's way, because I would have loved to have had that in my career. I would have loved to have had that, and I feel blessed to have the opportunity to do that. So I really truly believe it's both.
Laura, what does it look like? Like, what does a mentorship relationship is really special. So how do you find your mentors? How do you find your mentees? How do they find you? What does that look like in terms of support for young women in this field? Do they just find you and then you are available for conversation, or do they how does this work for you in policing? Because I know in education, it's a very specific thing as well. In many fields, it's a very specific process, sometimes too planned, sometimes kind of, idiosyncratic. You meet someone who's right and just clicks as a mentor. How is it working in policing?
So Joy and Laura, do you want me to answer that one, or do you want to jump in?
Well, I can tell you right now that if you think policing is a male-dominated profession, try charity work because it's even more so. My whole view of this is toxicity is toxicity. Yeah. And I think that an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed is called horizontal hostility. And I think, Joy, you kind of touched on that. I mean, I got on the OPP when I was 18, so I'm one of the youngest females ever hired on the OPP. The whole, like, to go through my journey of, like, it's very redundant because it's no different than usually anybody else. I retired as a constable because that was where I knew that I could get the most done and then flip over to an executive director. I think the horizontal hostility within females is very, very rampant. Like, it is extraordinarily rampant. And I'm seeing it in this space as well, through the charity space, because with a title comes, it can come with, a question of ego. And for leadership, I don't care whether you're male or female, you just have to be a good leader. Like, you have to, and I mean, I have my wish list for strong leadership, and I'm going through it. Very rarely do I see leaders that have the strong leadership that's on my wish list. Like, things like lead with integrity, not ego. I mean, listen before legislating, protect rights, not power. Like, we're all about the stigma of, I am, this is who I am. Mm-hmm. If you are not vulnerable, if you're not leading with your heart, if you're not, following through, and you're not leading with integrity, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. That's toxicity at its absolute core.
I wanted to add from that. And so certainly what I see in the work that I do with police services in particular, the one thing that if I had a wish list for leadership, it would be the ability to intervene, to redirect bad behavior, and to effectively resolve conflict. And one of my passion projects, and I've been working with others in my field, is to try to insert some competencies around conflict management and behavior, remedy into leadership. And it's not really there in most leadership training. And I hear from leaders all the time. When I worked as an advisor of the OPP, and I had the chance to talk to frontline, sergeants and supervisors, and they were clamoring for some training and coaching and support about how to do this, because they were beginning to recognize that it was expected of them, but they don't really know how to do it. And I will tell you, from someone in my field, like, to me, this is like bread and butter. Like, it's so basic, but it's missing in a lot. Like, we promote someone, you become a sergeant, you become a supervisor, off you go. And we don't really give them the tools or the competencies, or frankly, the support to create the environment that, we say should be there. And so, that's number one on my sort of wish list for when we talk about leadership development. There's lots of other, you have to be good at, managing time and resources, and all that stuff is great. That's for, other people to focus on. But the basics is, like, can you intervene, when you witness really egregious behavior right in front of you? Do you know how to resolve a conflict? And I will just say quickly that something I find fascinating is that these are a lot of skills that, most police officers know how to do outside. Like, you go out into the community and you de-escalate and you problem solve and you intervene in bad behavior, but you come back to your, district or your division or wherever you are, and it's like you hang that up at the door. It's fascinating to me why those skills are not seen as transferable and applying. And I think what we need to do is really call that out in police leadership and say, if you want to be a leader in policing from like frontline up, this is what's expected of you. But then we equally have to support them and train them and not assume that they know how to do this or they know what to do, particularly when it's internal, right? They know how to do it out there in the world, but it's like the minute you cross the threshold into, you know, the office, I don't know why it gets left outside. It's fascinating to me, but to me, that's like the number one thing we need to be focusing on when we talk about leadership and policing.
Interesting. Yeah, Natalie. Yeah.
I just listen, Nancy. I don't want to steal the show on the 30 Forward initiative. I'm watching the time here, and you know, I really think of all these are really great points and mentorship and leadership. But you know, truly, the 30 Forward initiative, I'm super hopeful, and I think that you know, the secret to change is really to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but in building the new. And I think the 30 Forward initiative certainly does that. And if anyone on this call that doesn't know what that is, it's about gender parity. And research tells us that 30% is the tipping point when an underrepresented group achieves 30% representation, begin to have influence on an organization's culture. And I think that the 30 Forward initiative is probably one of the most exciting things to happen in Ontario and Canadian policing in a long time. So Nancy, I'm giving some props, you know, pumping that initiative, but I think it's really important. And I think this is a great platform to do that.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, as you're speaking, it speaks to the larger contribution within the field. It's not just local, it's not just individual, it's not just mentoring one or two people. It's actually a broad initiative that is organizationally quite strong and is bound to get stronger as a result of all the support for it. And the visibility, I think it's visibility as well, in terms of just people's understanding about what it is and what it's actually trying to do in terms of the representation of women in policing, for sure.
Exactly that. I can tell you the first day I was ever in a cruiser with another woman, and I was like, are we allowed to do this? Is this illegal? I don't know. And now I'm running an organization with another woman. Is this illegal? I don't know. So I just say we are getting stronger. And like I said, 30 Forward, super important. And we're going to just keep pushing the envelope on that. And again, thanks to Val Gates and for bringing that to policing here in Canada.
And Val Gates and Rich are both here if they want to say anything about 30 Forward. Inviting you to say anything you'd like to say. For sure. And any questions, any comments, any thoughts about this idea of leadership and legacy? It's I'm just always struck, and I'm completely an outsider to policing, right? I'm an educator who works in police, with police. And a whole bunch of different groups of people, different professions. And my sense is that when I speak to women who are in policing, many of them are leaving, have left, are done, they're done. They're going into social work, they're going into fields that actually have a stronger communication focus, right? Their values actually are better represented in ways outside of the force, which I find sad. I mean, but I also find, you know, as we're listening, not a surprise either in terms of organizations and the way that they're set up. I'm fascinated by the leadership abandonment, right? Horizontal hostility. I've never heard that before, but it's definitely a thing across professions for sure. And also this kind of abandonment once someone has reached a position of leadership, not abandonment in terms of their responsibilities and what they need to be doing, but in terms of how they decide to embody the position of a leader. In ways that allow them to go home at the end of the day feeling that they have integrity, that they've done their job well, that they can, you know, sleep at night. And not to say that, you know, most leaders are not doing that. It's not a natural thing, though, I think, move into a position of leadership and simply, you know how to do that, know how to intervene, know how to have those really difficult conversations with colleagues or, you know, people on your same level, and also the people that are working with you. And that's where the things get crunchy, right? Where things really start falling apart. People start feeling badly and not valued. Anyway, I'm talking too much. So what do what do people have to add? Okay, thank you. You're adding your links, Natalie. Does anybody have any? Yeah, Les. You've raised your
Sorry.
hand. There we go.
Yeah, I
Yep.
just wanted to get my camera going there. My apologies. I just want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. I know we did a lot of work to put this together. I just wanted to make a couple quick comments that kind of struck a nerve, and I think it might be in that same realm that Nancy's talking about. Natalie and I come from the same time frame with legacy on the job, and I would say that in my experience, I've had other officers tell me when I was before I was a supervisor. I remember specifically one officer telling me that her boss had told her that they really liked her because she was one of the boys.
Right.
And I'm sure Natalie's going to sort of laugh at that remark, because the mentality has always been that it's a boys' club and the girls have to be like the boys to be in this club. They have to do the things that the boys want them to do and how the boys do it. And I know I'm kind of being sarcastic, but you know, when you talk about the tie, Natalie, that's what you're talking about. And then in the time frame that, you know, that I've become a supervisor, I've seen that same whisper, the same sort of piece of that mentality still exists in terms of you shouldn't have to feel like you have to break through something to just do the same job that we're all doing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you talk about your growth piece, when you first get on the job and seeing people that you learn from, or you mimic the things that they do to get better at the work that you do. I can tell you that I started on a shift that had some very strong female officers, and they were leaders, even though they were, you know, they were the constables, they weren't the supervisors. They were the leaders, and they were the ones out there working at 3 o'clock in the morning, stopping cars and arresting people. And it was very natural to fit into, to fit into that group and never recognize something different than that, because I was lucky enough as a junior officer to see that. And I never, it never made any difference to me what the gender of the officer was. So it's interesting that you say that, because it still exists now. As a supervisor now, I often have to urge some of the women that work for me to put in for promotion, put in for spots to try to advance their careers, because they have internalized this idea that they won't be successful, which is really sad. So Natalie, when you speak, you're giving hope to that idea. The last thing I would say is I'm sure Joy can agree that there's been a lot of work on ridding ourselves of the institutionalized characteristics that are biased to gender and other components of equity. From an institutionalized standpoint, if you look at, for example, if you look at procedures that say, they say the officer should do X as opposed to he should do X, he should do this, he should do that. We've kind of come a long way to get rid of the narrative so that it sounds like there's equality and equity there. But the reality is we still have officers, male officers, that dominate certain situations. And it quite often, from the perspective of what's available for women as far as advancement, those things are closed off from sort of an unwritten institutionalized narrative that we don't want to admit exists, right? So certain units that are very prestigious, for example, and then you look at how many women are working in those units, and they're not working in those units. And when they have competitions for those units, you don't see women getting jobs in those units. And then if those units, have 30% of the promotions for the year come out of those units, then from an institutionalized standpoint, those are 30% of promotions that women don't have open to them, and they're shut off. So there's a hidden piece there that even though we're acknowledging moving forward, we also still have that cultural challenge. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I see that you guys are doing great work in your areas. That's why I asked the three of you to be a part of this, and I just want to thank you.
Thanks, Les. Yeah, thanks, Les. So who wants to go first, Joy or Natalie? You both have your hands. Yeah.
I'm super short. I'm just going to say that thanks for that, Les, and appreciate that. And that just so you know, as I climbed the corporate ladder, I was part of hiring processes where I maybe had a panel of men. You know, lucky for me, in some of those rooms, I was the highest ranking officer. But there was behind the scenes conversations about giving men autonomy to pick their own teams, and having women applying, you know, the principles of rules of engagement for a lateral process. And yet, you know, amazed that I'm in a room having this conversation because I am female, and I could just imagine how many of those conversations happened when I wasn't in the room, and hearing, you know, men advocate for something that they think is very reasonable about picking their team. But just remember the pink experiment.
Yeah.
There's connectivity there. There's connective tissue there. Women have skills, you know, but they are picked last. And I have been part of those conversations and been in those rooms. So thanks for acknowledging that, Les.
Yeah, thank you. Joy.
I was just going to say quickly that what Les hit on and Natalie was talking about is it's the difference between diversity and inclusion. So organizations have done a lot to open their doors to a broader group of people, and they've, you know, genericized their policies and done all kinds of things. But that's about kind of diversity and maybe a little bit of equity. But true inclusion takes the work to overcome, to change mindsets, to really go a little deeper, to uncover the kinds of things that you're both talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of organizations are realizing that. So they, you know, they broaden their, you know, recruitment, and they try to promote, you know, a more diverse group of people. They haven't really done anything to allow those people to succeed or to be welcome or to have equity. And that's something we have to pay a lot more attention to. You've got to have, you know, all those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the police organizations are starting to realize that.
Yeah, really great point. Right. Absolutely. It is about people feeling that they belong, feeling that they are safe to belong in whatever way, because they're respected and they're valued in the same way as, you know, the next person, for their part. Terry. Hi, Terry.
Hi. I disappeared for a little while because we had a little power outage. Sorry about that. But I got plugged back in, and here I am. So I just want to make a comment that I taught for 38 years at the University of the Fraser Valley in a program where there was a field practice placement, and 60% of my students were women. And so I had to place them across agencies, from immigration to customs to policing to corrections, and a range of other areas, including women's centers, transition centers. And I actually placed some men in women's transition centers. One of them, who was leading a women's transition center, who was also teaching at our university. So I had the opportunity to experience the emotions with those women that I placed. And after about 10 years, I started placing all of my students with people who were graduates, so that they understood the training and the skills that were necessary to gain credibility in the workplace. And so what happened was more women started getting promoted. And I was really grateful to see that. And I just think that what you've accomplished is amazing, because you've moved into not only senior positions, but consulting positions and change agent positions. So I just want to honor that. And just respect the difficulty you had in making that transition. So that's about, I think, everything that I need to say right now, but thank you for this presentation, and I'm still learning. I think that the powerful thing that women brought to the workplace that I placed in various agencies was emotional and social intelligence. That was the power that they brought into the workplace. And it really helped a lot of the men to feel understood, to feel that they could be a part of actually a larger, more connected workplace. So I just think that the emotional and social intelligence capacity and skills, which we taught at our university, and the women picked up on it really quickly, and the men in the classes that I taught had a struggle with it because they just weren't expected to behave empathically as they grew up. They didn't have that in their chum buddy sports events. The empathy wasn't there except for a pat on the back. But real understanding and communication wasn't taking place. So I just think that's so important. And that's a primary kind of strength that women bring into the workplace, even from just because of their very nature of being more sensitive and awake to the social aspects of any situation, particularly in a domestic dispute situation. I'm seeing our graduates who are women were able to move into that situation with much more aplomb than the men would.
Thank
So
you.
bravo.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So let's put in Terry. I think that is I think the EI part is what Laura's was talking about when she was talking about vulnerability. I mean, did you want to say anything more about that, Laura?
Well, I think it's one of these where we have to, if we're going to be a good leader, we have to take ego out of it. And you have to look over, you want to do service over self. So that's the piece of, it's okay to say, I don't know. And as soon as we bring in the egos and the icons, that's where the toxicity comes in. And we need to address that and lead more with vulnerability and lead more with heart. And I think that that's, as executive director, right now in a space that is definitely 100% male dominated and a bigger employees club than policing could ever be. That's exactly what I'm doing. And it's ruffling feathers because I'm not leading with an ego and an icon.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite areas, as well as my colleague Carrie on the call here will suggest is we talk about emotion as hidden in plain sight. It's not that it's not there, it's always there. And to imagine that it's not there, and actually every single decision you're making is like trying to do something without your left arm or your right arm. It's there. And so I think it's fascinating when we think about policing education, how I don't think it's an intent. Well, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but this feeling that it needs to get pushed off to the side in order for people to be strong and do the things they need to do, when in fact it's a valuable part. It's an essential part of the critical decision making you're doing every day. So it's an interesting kind of Terry, you're reminding me of this. It's an interesting, important cultural piece of teaching, of education, of recognition of the work that police officers do when they're out in the field. They do really hard things. They do really scary things. But it's not like, you can actually take your emotions and put them over there until this thing is finished. So how do we get people to metabolize their emotions in a way that is it's emotional intelligence, that is part of their intelligence system, and use it? That's all. I kind of love that part of the conversation. And we think about it as hidden in plain sight because everybody, it's there. Everybody's just kind of pretending it's not, right? And that, I think, sits with both in practice and in office and organizational groups as well. How do we, so Joy, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, this is how do we develop our communication skills in such a way that we can, right, have leaders be able to communicate with others in really difficult situations. Yeah. Somebody's raised their hand. David.
Yes, I'm reluctant to speak about this because in my policing career, I worked with some great women, and Terry, you might have remembered Mary Fraser, who she was my field trainer in Vancouver. She's in her 90s and was an amazing person as a guider of young constables who were full of piss and vinegar. But I'm going back a couple of years when I was doing discipline work. And one of my biggest frustrations was we've gone to this place where we were moving in I'll say a faster direction of dealing with bad behavior in the workplace, in particular individuals who are predatory against women, and we kind of had that taken away from us with the civilian oversight, and what I found was we were now less effective because everybody would be dragged through this 6-month to 2 or 3 year process, and at the end the outcomes were not that great, and the people who were dragged through this process, and I'm not talking about the men, I'm talking about the complainants, primarily women, even if their side was accepted, it was the process that was the deterrence for them to come forward and make a complaint versus, and I'm talking about respectful workplace policy, where we had full control over that early on, and for the most part, it was being responsibly administered in a quick, effective fashion in an internal discipline process. So some of the things that I'm retired now, but some of the things we face in policing is external interference that prevents us from applying effective processes to deal with things quickly and deal with them more, I would say, more openly, because sometimes you have to deal with something in a everybody knows what's going on, but dealing with it in a more public within the department forum to send a strong message that this kind of behavior is not acceptable. And I think we're losing traction in that area. I think we lost traction in that area, and it'd be nice to get that back so that we have a better way of dealing with things, because currently it almost emboldens the behavior, especially when it takes 18 months plus to resolve some of these matters.
Yeah, I just was going to comment quickly because that's sort of my wheelhouse. I will just say that is one of the issues that gave rise to the working group on respectful workplaces. Now, I will say we are primarily in Ontario, although we do have participants from across Canada, but it was born out of a recognition that what was in place was not working. The behaviors were still happening, but also the experience of the participants, both complainants and respondents, and some of the confusion or the overlap between police discipline and respectful workplace, and all of these things are what gave rise to the need for something better. So if people are interested, you can go to the OAC website, and our material is there. But just quickly, we just last year launched best practices around this, and we're now beginning to work with police services to look at better ways for prevention and response. But I'll just say that was a common experience, and there were many other issues, and that's why it was decided, let's come together as a sector and work on this. So like I said, it's very Ontario based, but we do have participation from across Canada, and I think that there's a lot of value in trying to address some of these issues head on, because there's unique cultural issues in policing, but there's also unique legislative and discipline and all of these things. And that's really, you know, what gave rise to that group and the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. We're coming close to the end. I'm curious if anyone has any questions or comments they'd like to speak up about. I think we're a small enough group. You could just come on camera or turn on your mic if you wanted to. And I see mics come back on. Any last minute comments or questions? I love this. Thank you so much for this conversation. I find it really valuable and important. Yeah, especially right now, I think really important.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you for my co-panelists for sharing, and I've learned from some of the things, and
Yeah.
certainly identify with some of those insights. And I just wanted to thank everyone for extending the invitation to opening up this platform for me to share some of my insights in 15 minutes and just a quick and dirty journey of that I've had in policing. So thank you for that, Nancy and the team.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you. Lovely. Lovely. Yes, thank you, Joy. Thank you, Laura. Really learned a lot. And Mike, was there any, you're on camera, was there any last words you wanted to say? I'm just kidding.
Well, thank you. If we reach the point where we're winding up, I do have a couple of concluding comments to make, but I want to make sure that I give everybody an ample opportunity to wade in before doing that. So I'll just give a second for those maybe who are forming their thoughts, just to wade in.
Absolutely.
Okay, then, if you don't mind, give me the honor of kind of saying a few concluding comments. First of all, to our speakers, I believe that you have provided a realistic, powerful, but hopeful and encouraging message. I want to thank you for your participation, but more importantly, thank you for your public service. I'm also going to promise you something on behalf of the CCPR, and that's to incorporate the knowledge and experience of the speakers and what they discussed today into a learning experience for those who intend to enter policing and for those who aspire to leadership. You might know that the CCPR's major initiative is to establish a national center of police learning where we could establish a post-secondary school standardized curriculum for those who intend to enter policing and for those who aspire to police leadership. And some of the subjects that we anticipate being incorporated into this program would, of course, be the topics addressed today, the broad spectrum of both the experience of those in policing, the impact it has on the community, and those leadership aspects that we've talked about today. So your contribution has gone beyond just today's immediate purpose of serving a public education opportunity. So again, I'm grateful. And then I would be remiss if I didn't give out a special thank you to our webinar committee for producing such an informative and impactful session. I'd like to specifically acknowledge our former chair of the webinar committee, Detective Sergeant Les Titleman, his co-chair, Defeat Herman, who's here today. There are others, of course. And a special thank to our volunteer session technician, Hannah Steffies, and of course to you, Nancy, for moderating. And subject to anybody else's comments, I'll conclude my remarks at this point. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of such a great experience.